Greetings, everyone. I am Queen Diambi Kabatuswila Chiyoyomwata, Mukalenga Mukajiwa Kashama, Wabakwaluntu, Wabaluba, Wakasai wa Congo. That is Queen of the Order of the Leopard, of the Bakwaluntu people, of the Luba tribe of Kasai in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I am also Grande Mãe do Povo Bantu Brasileiro, that is Queen of the African descendants of Brazil. I am very honored and pleased to be here and to convey this small message for all of you. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there personally with all of you, and it's going to be just this video message that will convey the gratefulness I have of having been given this opportunity to be able to address you. So I want to really talk about Africa and the value of our culture, Africa and the value of our heritage, and Africa and the value of our identity. Africa, of course, is a great continent with great diversity, and we are all very much different, but we are also very much alike in so many ways, from the north to the south, from the east to the west, passing through the center. We have so many diversity, different cultures, different languages, different practices. So it's really difficult to lump Africa and to say just Africa is like just one, big people. We are diverse indeed, but there are also some very fundamental values that we all hold, no matter where we are in the continent and from the continent. So those values are ingrained in our cultures. Those values are ingrained in our traditions. And for too long, I believe Africa has been in a place where we were almost encouraged to leave behind our historical heritage and culture. And we were supposed to kind of like leap into the so-called modern world after we had gone through all the episode of enslavement of our people, colonization. And so the next step was that, okay, you're going to get your independence, and now off you go and you catch up with the rest of the world, and you just, pace yourself so that you can become just like all the other nations in the world. And of course, I find it to be quite interesting because no work has really been done in Africa to talk about everything that we have gone through, not just to talk about it so we can be aware of it, but to talk about it so we can also heal, because we have gone through extremely traumatic series of events for quite some time now, for a couple of centuries. And those events have in some way influenced us so that we now almost want to turn the page and look to the future, but not look to the past. I am a therapist. I am a psychologist as well as an economist, but in my quality of a therapist, it's really fundamental to talk about the role of healing and the role that visiting the past and talking about the past, mastering the understanding of our history, can play in redefining the African identity today. We understand that when we have to refer to our history, is so that we can, for once, talk about our history through our own perspective. For way too long, our history has been told to us by people who actually came from foreign lands and decided to describe us and decided to chronicle our history as if we were not, capable of doing so ourselves. So for too long, the narrative about Africa has been really owned by people that were non-Africans, in particular Europeans and Westerners. So I think the reason why it's so important that we take a look at our history is because in those traumatic events, we also lost some of our greatness. We lost some of our trust in who we are or who we were. We lost the understanding of the great value we brought to the world civilization. We lost the understanding to to see that we are capable of transforming, our reality. We became dependent on the people who colonized Africa to tell us about us, to tell us the narrative that they wanted. And today we have come into a place where we have such a huge image deficit because we have not been responsible to portray our own image, to forecast and put out there our own narrative about who we are. So I'll give you an example. When I accepted to be the traditional queen of the Bakwaluntu people, the Bena Chiamba in Kasai, many people, including in the Congo, were really puzzled and asking themselves, why would I accept such a charge? Why would I accept, something that was really of no relevance at all, to in this modern day and age? So many people didn't see the relevance of what something like that could bring to my people, or to myself for that matter. But I had to really do a lot of soul searching and dig deep to really understand the value of what an heritage is. See, everybody else on the planet have built their heritage over time, and have even used the African heritage to build their own heritage, to build their own civilization. They have taken from Africa numerous things of value and have sometimes labeled it differently than what it was, to build upon this heritage. And heritage is something that gives you the foundation on which you can lay the edifice of building your life and building a life for your community and for your country. When you start with no heritage, or when you deny yourself to appropriate yourself from the wealth that your heritage gives you, you will start already losing. And for too long, they told us, the African people, that our heritage was basically just a mere collection of folkloric posturing or folkloric practices that had no other value than those of being artistic and reminiscent of what we used to do in the past, maybe some dressing or some music and chant and song and so forth. And that was really the value that we could see into what we have inherited from our ancestors. And I don't believe this is true. I believe that Africa has to reconcile with herself. I believe that Africa has to really reclaim the greatness of the heritage that she has from all her ancestors and all these diverse cultures. See, the continent of Africa is very complex indeed and very different, but we do have, as I said, a common denominator. And if I may just use one word to encapsulate this common denominator, it's a word that everybody's now starting to understand, is Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is of course a Bantu word, but it's a value of community. I am because we are. I am because you are. Meaning that no one stands alone, that everyone can only thrive in the midst of a community when the community herself is thriving. So the Ubuntu principle is a principle that has been applied all throughout the continent for ages. If I go further down and look at Kemet, what the Greek called Egypt, Kemet, that was one of the biggest and most prosperous civilization of the African continent by African people, had a principle of Mahat that is kind of an equivalent of Ubuntu. Mahat is to be in peace and in balance with the community. It can be other people, it can be the community of all the environment that we have around us. So it was all the values that were to sustain peace in a community. So those fundamental values that we had allowed us to develop civilizations and great cultures, and from those cultures came kingdoms, like some of the kingdoms you all come from, or my kingdom. And the history of the continent is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. And what does that mean? It means that we have collected an abundant amount of information about life, about nature that surrounds us, about the nature that we see in the sky. And we were the one to invent calendars. We were the one to observe the cycles of the stars. We were the one who invented the time. We are the ones who invented so many different things because we were there from a very long time in the same environment. We were able to observe reality and to draw the laws of creation through our observations and confirmation of our observation over time. We are the precursors of every single science that exists. We are the ones who started and discovered mathematics and applied mathematics in many different domains, including in architecture, including in different sciences. We have accomplished so much things, but we have lost track of what we have actually accomplished. We have not put our heritage as a paramount value in our development. The narrative has been taken away from our hands for many, many centuries. And I think that it's now a time with a lot of the young people in Africa, in the continent, and also in the African diaspora, wants to know about who we truly are. And we cannot know who we truly are unless we learn about the legacy of our ancestors. What was the meaning of all our traditions? What was our understanding? What is the great body of knowledge that we have left, our ancestors have left for us to discover? What is the great wisdom in all our sacred stories, in all our practices, in all our songs and dances? What was the great understanding that we have derived from being here for the longest time and being in peace and harmony with self and with the environment? What can all of that bring to us today as we are talking about developing ourselves? Those are very fundamental questions because they are questions that will define how we want to identify ourselves. Today, more than ever, we will need a strong identity. And I am a Pan-Africanist because I believe that we have a common denominator all throughout Africa, all throughout the African experience in the world, meaning all the African diaspora. Could it be in the Americas or the Caribbean or even in Europe or Asia? Anywhere we are, we have a common thread. We also have a common thread because of the suffering we went through. The type of abuse, the type of lack of human rights, the type of lack of access to resources. The last time I checked, we are still the one people on the planet who have the least access to the good education, who have the least access to good healthcare, who have the least access to good housing, who have the least access to, freedom of speech, least access to justice. And it's important that we recognize that because we are all suffering from the same kind of conditions, no matter where in the world we are, that should be a driver for us to unite, to find solutions to common problems. Because regardless of where we are in the world, those problems are plaguing our communities. So in order for us to find solutions, we have to get to know each other. We have to know to learn how to appreciate each other. And I think to see and to identify all the areas where we are so similar, and then to identify, of course, the areas where we are different, it's going to help us really value what makes us Africans. It's going to help us value the fact that we are the firstborn of humanity, that for over 150,000 years, we were the only people on the planet. There was no other people but Africans on the planet. It's only 70,000 years ago that the humans decided to start moving out of Africa. And there were Africans moving out of Africa. And then the second wave left 40,000 years ago. So the African Odyssey out of Africa is quite recent when we compare it to the length of the existence of humanity on Earth. So Africa is really the home of humanity, not just the cradle. I will call it the home, I will call it the church, I will call it the temple, I will call it the university. This is where humanity spent most of its existence. So that should tell us a lot about that continent. That should tell us that it's time. We are putting time and effort to restore our path to claiming the heritage that our ancestors have left us. Many of the pieces of arts and craft that our ancestors left contained great symbolism, contained great teachings. And a lot of these pieces sits in many museums in Europe, in the Americas, or maybe even in Asia. So a lot of our own, makings are not in Africa. And all of these were containing information. So the reason why I'm talking about all of that, and I'm stressing on the point that it's extremely important, even here as we are talking about personal development or business development, is that without a sane identity, without understanding and respecting who we truly are, building anything around a meager or a weak identity is not going to last, because we need solid foundation to build on top of. And no one ever has developed themselves outside of their culture. So to look at what everybody else is doing is great. To take the few elements that are from different cultures is not bad, because that's what life is about. We exchange, we learn from each other. But to put other values of other cultures in the mix of your own and in the center of what you aspire to become, this is where the problem is, because we will never be other people. We will always be Africans. And so today, the few words I wish to say to this honorable audience is that it's a new day. It's a new day for the continent. It's a new day for the people of the continent. And it's a new day for all the friends of Africa. Because with this movement, to know who we truly are, we can stand in front of the world, unapologetically African, inviting anybody to come, of course, to Africa and to learn about who we truly are. But we can only do that if we ourselves take the responsibility and take it as a point of honor to really rediscover the heritage of our forefathers, to restore the truth about our history, to not be afraid to talk about difficult times of our history, because we will require to know what really happened and why, so that we can derive understanding of why we are the way we are today and why we have still some challenges today. And then we can, from then, create a protocol for our healing and for the edification of our people. So as a traditional queen, my job is to be an ambassador. My job is to say to my fellow Africans, stand tall, be proud of who you are. Despite the fact that we went through such a brutal history for a couple of centuries where many have come to Africa to plunder and pillage and rape and destroy and not really leave much of good behind, yet we are still here. And that shows the strength of our character. That shows our great resilience. And so this have to be the fundamental values on which we rebuild our continent. So I invite us not to go out there and just copy for copy and try to catch up with the rest of the world, but I invite African people to really reflect in what it is to be an African, who is proud of the heritage that our forefather left, how we can use that knowledge, how we can use that wisdom, how we can use that pride to then build and construct our own indigenous model of development, model that fits our beliefs, model that fits our needs, model that fits our values, so that we can do better for ourselves. We have, of course, to take a look at everyone else and what everyone else has done. But because we are anchored into who we truly are, we will also be able to select and pick and choose what fits us and what doesn't. In this day and age, we're talking about environment so much. It's a time where Africans cannot think about development without thinking about the future, without thinking about preservation of our lands and preservation of our environment and protection of our environment, should I say. So we have in front of us a great opportunity, but we have to stand. We can no longer let everyone dictate for us what is good for us. We really have to take our courage to discover who we truly are, to reclaim our heritage, and to build upon that heritage and make sound choices that correspond to our identity. And this is really the biggest message that I wanted to share with you today. It's to encourage you to not be shy, to ask the right questions, and to not accept the history of Africa as it was told to you by those people who oppressed Africa. So it's time to value our own research, our own understanding, and to teach that to our youngsters and to teach that to our children. Because see, this next generation is demanding answers. The next generation is demanding that we set the record straight. The next generation is demanding that we provide them with the truth so that they can stand just like anyone else in the world, proud and strong and really honored to be an African. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for all the attention that you have paid to my short message. Have a wonderful rest of the day.